Welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings and workshops, literary programming for people of all ages, all currently available online. Our theme for 2021 is Taking Care. We'll be celebrating all the ways we can take care of ourselves and take care of others this year. You can check out our upcoming schedule at wab.org. We're so happy to have Amma Codjoe with us this evening. First, we'll hear from Amma, then she'll be in conversation with the poet Aricka Foreman. Feel free to submit questions to the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. Amma's book, Blood of the Air, is available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the link in the chat. Amma Codjoe's Blood of the Air creates a new mythology, repurposing spectacle, stereotype, and song. Lush, lyrical moments give way to fracture, vulnerability, and reinvention. Formerly dexterous and refreshingly bold, the poems in Blood of the Air are urgent, moving, and fiercely imagined. Amma Codjoe has been awarded support from the Canem, Saltonstall, Jerome, and Robert Rauschenberg Foundations, as well as from the Callaloo Creative Writing Workshop and the MacDowell Colony. She is the recipient of the Georgia Review's 2018 Loraine Williams Poetry Prize, a 2019 DISQUIET Literary Prize, a 2019 NEA Creative Writing Fellowship, and a 2020 NYFA Artist Fellowship. Amma, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan. And thanks to all of my homies who are out there, and to Allison and Myers for the invitation, Writers and Books for hosting us, and a dear and special thank you to Aricka Foreman for joining me in conversation today. So I'm gonna read from Blood of the Air, and I'm gonna kind of string together the poems with some quotations that I think speak to some of the themes in the book. Starting with a poem called Nasty Woman. Inside me, a nasty gal growls like the gravel racing beneath a motorcycle, louder than the engine churring inside. There's always been a bird inside me, Betty Davis said. And because I've learned to decipher one black bird in a mob of blackbirds, I know the bird inside her, inside me, is neither raven nor blackbird nor grackle. I can tell by the way it caws inside the nasty gal's lusty snarl. The bird inside her, inside me, is crow. Carrion rots further in crow's gizzard. Sometimes the dead animal is love. Sometimes I offer a part of myself, carcass on the believer's tongue. Yesterday, I fed Crow 3 names written in blue ink on torn notebook paper. The day before, an idea of myself died. Crow devoured it greedily. The Betty inside me rasps and howls, wearing a zebra print leotard, straddling the rungs of my ribs and blowing into the ram-like horns of my uterus. Betty dines on what's alive. Electric guitar, gray suede shoes, lewd as an unchaste nude, vulgar as a seasick sailor steering a tempest-tossed ship, nasty as funk, funky as an armpit, gritty as grits, filthy as the back of your mama's neck, raw as sushi, raw as Eddie Murphy, pitifully nasty, nasty as graffiti in the men's locker room. Betty loves to hear the story of Artemis, the virgin goddess, who as punishment for ogling at her river-cleaned pubis, transformed Actaeon into a stag and watched his own pack of hounds tear him to smithereens. Betty can live off that story for weeks. That and chocolate ice cream. The Betty inside me licks her lips suggestively. She's got a foul mouth and glorious teeth and a beak as sharp as a sword. Inside me is a nasty gal, housed by a nastier woman. Quote, when the king decides to rape you, no one will use the word rape. The word does not exist in the king's world. Karthika Nair, Until the Lions. Blood of the air. 1. When Zeus saw her, he fell in love with her. He transformed into a swan and appeared in 2. Front of her. He seduced her and slept with her. 3. Leda was admired by Zeus, who seduced her in the guise of a swan. As a swan, Zeus fell into 4. Her arms for protection from a pursuing eagle. 5. Leda was a beautiful woman. Her beauty attracted the attention of Zeus, who spied her. 6. From his throne on Mount Olympus, the beauty of Leda roused Zeus to action. And the god, 7, transformed himself into a magnificent swan. Then, portraying himself as a bird escaping 8 from a bird of prey, Zeus lay down next to Leda and impregnated her. 9, she was seduced by Zeus in the shape of a swan. 10, according to the common legend, Zeus visited Leda in the disguise of a swan, and she, 11, produced 2 eggs. 12, Zeus, in the form of a swan, consorted with Leda. 13, Zeus, father of the gods, fell in love with the beautiful Leda, and when rejected by her, 14, turned himself into a swan. Quote, myths are more than made-up stories. They are also firmly held beliefs that represent an attempt to explain what we perceive to be the truth. They can become more credible than reality. Dorothy Roberts, Killing the Black Body. Poem after Betty Saar's The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, as spoken by Aunt Jemima. What if, Betty, instead of a rifle or hand grenade, what if after the loaded gun that takes 2 hands to fire, I lay down the splintered broom and the steel so cold it wets my cheek? What if I unclench the valleys of my fist and lay down the wailing baby? Gonna burn the moon in a cast iron skillet. Gonna climb the men who, when they see my face, turn into stony mountains. Gonna get out of the kitchen. Gonna try on my nakedness like a silk kimono. Gonna find me a lover who eats nothing but pussy. Let the whites of my eyes roll, roll. Gonna clench my toes. Gonna purr beneath my own hand. Gonna take down my hair. Try on a crown of crow feathers. Gonna roam the wide aisles of the peach grove, light dripping off branches like syrup, leaves brushing the fuzz of my arms. You dig? Gonna let the juice trickle down my chin, gonna smear the sun like war paint across my chest, gonna shimmy into a pair of royal blue bell bottoms, gonna trample the far out thunder clouds, heavy in their lightness, watch them slink away. Gonna grimace, gonna grin, gonna lay down my sword, pick up the delicate eggs of my fist, gonna jab the face that hovered over mine. It's easy to find the lips, surrounded as they are in minstrel black. Gonna bloody the head of every god, ghost, or swan who has torn into me, pried me open with its beak. Gonna catch my breath in a hunting trap, gonna lean against the ropes, gonna break the nose of mythology. Good night, John boy. Gonna ice my hands in April's stream, gonna scowl and scream and shepherd my hollering into a green pasture, gonna mend my annihilations into a white picket fence, gonna whip a tornado with my scarlet handkerchief, spin myself dizzy as a purple-lipped drunkard. Gonna lay down by the riverside, sticky and braless in the golden sand. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Quote, there are luminous, albeit terrible facts I must simply transcribe. I, the scribe, others transform. But on the same point, I submit you have to strike down your own mythology about yourself, your loves, your ravishing and atavistic homeland. I am interested in the vision beyond this confrontation, boundaries of illumination between the created, the recreated, the newly gleaned, the as yet incomprehensible. C.D. Wright. Burying seeds for Betty Shabazz, who when they killed her husband was carrying twin girls, not in her arms, but in an armless sea with bits of blood as food. She covered her daughters in the waters of her body. She covered her daughters in the rooms her body built, pressed against the wooden floor of the Audubon ballroom. She must have cried as my mother did when she stuttered, twins, into the paper gown of the hospital room. The body longs for its double. Even twins stretch long their arms toward other strangers. The first time I visited a mosque, I was surprised to be separated from my father and brothers. I sat with the women and girls alone. From across the aisle, I stared at the men longingly. As a child, I asked my preschool teacher why I couldn't play outside shirtless like the boys. It was a hot day. Before she could answer, I relented, wearing my favorite undershirt, the one with Archie, Betty, and Veronica, chasing my sun-kissed brothers across the playground. Lately, when I glimpse my nakedness in the half mirror above the bathroom sink, I'm looking at the photograph of Pauline Lumumba, bearing her breast as a sign of mourning. The widow's breast and mine hang like four weeping eyes, without titillation, fertility, or innocence. I wanted to write a poem for Betty Shabazz because her high cheekbones and luminous eyes are like a bakongo mast breathed into with life. After her husband's lifeless body was wrapped in white linen and covered by the words, what we place in the ground is no more now a man, but a seed. She took one last look at him who had smiled at her and touched countless times her unveiled face. My mother did not wear a veil on her wedding day. 18 years after their divorce, my father fidgets with the gold band she slid along his finger. As she made a circle with her thumb and forefinger, shimmying the ring over my father's knuckle, which words did her mind circle over? Worse or better? Death or death? That night, did my mother bunch the hotel bed sheet in one hand like a nosegay? Did she allow it, another white dress, to drag, crumpled behind her? The vows we promise one another are veils through which we envision the future. We enact our dreams using a vision clouded by tulle and lace. Grief-stricken, Betty Shabazz said of her husband's assassination, well, it finally happened. Weeks prior, she had taken to wearing her husband's hat for comfort and continued to do so after he died. I want a desire that could be mistaken for grief to cloud my face, to make me shudder, to twist my mouth into a cry. Once, I shared a bed with a man who as a boy heard his parents' lovemaking. I was confused, he admitted. It sounded like they were in pain. Grief is the bride of every good thing, Betty Shabazz reminds me. I'm wearing a veil the shape of a waterfall, which is also the shape of my mother's dress falling from her shoulders. Through its fabric, I can see a cloud turning into a horse and a plane that could be a star that might be a planet. It's hard to tell from here, wrapped in the call of the present, fixed on this plot of grass, with so many seeds buried underground, and winter forged into a circle, threatening never to end. Thank you. I would love to invite Aricka to share a poem with us.
Mama, how can I? That was so, so, so beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to hear these poems aloud that I've been living with off and on for the past 2 months now. It's just been such an exquisite mirroring, and I'm just so appreciative for all you do in terms of letters and speaking our names and speaking our voices and putting us in conversation. So I'm so honored to be here with you.
Thank you so much for being here. And I just, this is for everyone, this is like part of our introduction to each other. And I just would love to hear a poem as we begin to talk from you. And shout out to this gorgeous book.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Here we have friendship books up together. Sharing love always. So you requested this poem, which I'm always interested what poems people gravitate to in the book. And this one, the content is what it is. I'm not gonna like preface that with anything, but like it was such a fun poem to write because of the music. And I noticed some of those like same musical inclinations in play in your work. And so I was really excited that you chose this poem. So this is Failed Reincarnation Before a Lancipene. My honeycomb illness of bees buzzing bright in the brain, their sticky spittle turning hours in kaleidoscope that slow drip, the trees autumnal gold. How it latches to the shoulders of pedestrians like the take me with you of lovers, take me across the thresh of whichever door might amp this song up. Good needle jitter, when the station stuck between suffer and c'est la vie. Who in a body like this can afford to believe in reincarnation? Though once I dreamed a river of mercurial silt and gold bangles, bridging over my opened wrist, and the sun's radial rippling despite rising brown water. Here, language in limbo, of leveraging one evening for a hush, if you can manage, a whisper taught or torch or touch can bind you to a fever if unchecked, let. Wound, then bruise renders blues inevitable. From the green porch, I swing between the whir of dissolving cars that whip and exhale. Panic pitters its baseline like a house track, begs, dance, 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 dance. Asks if you believe in a God who demands to witness what worship wild abandon becomes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's like it's Alma Day. She can have whatever she
Thank you, Aricka.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous. Oh, I love the music in that poem so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I find there's, again, like there's so many things. I know we won't get to like all of my questions because I'm like, ooh, and this, ooh, and this, and ooh, and this. But in particular, while the slippage from like witness and agency in the first poem from Burying Seeds and talking about Betty Shabazz, but also this like unification of all these questions about girlhood and how one traverses through that, particularly when you're talking about mythology and like the myths that we're taught of how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to perform even in our grief. And so there are those large things that I'm just like, oh, this is, you know, such powerful, powerful things to point out. But I also like, there's just such beautiful music. So like, when you were reading it out loud, again, I was thinking of these few lines that I'd like to read back, both in image and in music. Lately, when I glimpse my nakedness in the half mirror above the bathroom sink, I'm looking at the photograph of Pauline Lumumba bearing her breast as a sign of mourning. And there's something about the way the oral sensibilities just like fall off the tongue really lovely as you're traversing this complicated sort of thing. So I wonder, I don't know, what do you, I just want to hear what you have to say about this poem because I love it so much.
Yeah. I There's something about the repetition of the words that I think allowed for me to go all these other places. And actually I think allowed for me to continue. And part of what I was thinking about when I was composing the poem was just about like going on. Sometimes I get to the end and I'm like, that's the end. And like inside my head, I'm like, that's not the
That's
end.
not the end.
You gotta push yourself. So I think the diction really helped with that. Like I could use the same word and not even like necessarily thinking about sound in terms of rhyme or slant rhyme or something, but just like the same word and let that kind of transport me other places. And then this, there's a lot of doubling in the poem. There's, the veil and the when I think about Betty Shabazz, one of the images that comes to mind is her with a veil, and then thinking about wedding and veil and just all of the things that are kind of, when you put them next to each other, they start to make this flourishing happen. So yeah, it was a poem that came little by little, but almost as it was in the end, so very kind of painstakingly came, but it didn't need a lot of work after it came.
Yeah, for sure. I love you're talking about this doubling in the poem, but also there's a lot of like doubling and echoing like throughout the entire collection. And so even, because I'm going to get to the question of the queen bees, right? So like, even the notion of having this doubling that starts off the poem and then the entire collection with Betty Shabazz. And then as we, sort of traverse again through the rest of the poems, then you see, Betty Sard and you see Betty Davis. And so I'm really interested in, because I know that we have our compulsions and our obsessions, and sometimes like when we have those painstaking poems and they take a while, but like they've lived in us for so long, even as we're pouring them on the page. So they sort of echo in other ways. And sometimes at the end of it, you're like, oh, I've been like really interested in like, who are all the Bettys? How are they pushing up against their own mythologies? What are the things that, we can take and learn from them as figures? So I would love for you to tell me about the love for the queen bees.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was at a residency, which my poet friends know and my family and friends know that I like really love a residency. And it was a long one. It was 3 months. And so the first half of it, I had spent like writing in a very concentrated way this draft of my first full length, which completely changed. But I had like a month and a half left, and I was like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And Danica Kelly actually has always been like, I love a good chapbook. Like, and I was like, maybe I'll write a chapbook.
Yeah.
And so the first idea, even though it's a little random, was like Betty's. Like, I don't know why. Anytime like I've seen The Liberation of Aunt Jemima was one of those pieces that I saw and knew that I would write about one day. And then I just started listing Betty's in my head, and it became obviously a book about other things. But
always
yeah, the Betty's were the genesis. And there's also the Betty Crocker.
Yes.
And
I love that as a response to that ad. I was like, yo.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, just thinking about like the feminine and domestic and all of the things that you were saying, just about like what a received mythology is about, what girlhood is and what a woman is and what a Black woman is. So it started to speak to each other. And I think the nice thing about a chapbook is like you can kind of see the conversation, as opposed to a full length. It's like you kind of have to keep figuring out. But with those short, that you can really like look at it all at once and kind of see how it's in dialogue with each other.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I shout out to Danica Kelly, because I love a good chapbook too. I get a little kind of aggy when people are like, oh, blah, blah, blah. That's great, but it's just a chapbook. And I'm like, it's such an important part of like our literary tradition. And then also, we used to get EPs all the time. We wait on singles before an album drops. Like, why are y'all so
Totally.
pressed? Like, it, yeah. But yeah, no, I love, love, love that as like a genesis, because that's usually what happens, right? You're like, it seems random, but then you start to see all the other threads that pull in and kind of like
Mhm.
cover all of these other things that are in conversation and are in
Mhm.
relationship to, you know, again, those tiny little seeds that we planted. And it's like, oh
Right.
no, it's a part of an entire ecosystem. So
And
I
in some
love
ways, it's like when you do the kinds of forms that are Olympic, like do a this and a this and a this in a
it.
poem, and your subconscious gets to like just actually do what it wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
So having like this, I want to do all these Betty things, but really like, the themes that I clearly was thinking about and caring about were around like sexual violence and, um, stereotypes of Black women and
Mm-hmm.
artists who are, making work in conversation with like this legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, it was maybe a helpful trick.
For sure. For sure. I love that. And I also love to like, I find you pivot a lot between like there are poems that are persona, there are poems that are specifically speaking to the figure in a very intimate way. And then I got to, which I'm so intrigued by, I got to the beekeeper's husband and
Mhm.
trying to like understand, okay, what is the witness? What is the agency? Because you toggle agency really, I think, both effectively, but very intentionally. Like, I'm going to recover this feminine agency despite this particular violence, whether it's sexual, whether it is, infrastructure, white capitalist, whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
So there is a lot of like assemblage, but there's also like this recovery,
Mhm.
which I find really interesting in the way that you like jump around in terms of who is speaking and how you're having them speak. But yeah, with the beekeeper's husband, I was just like, this is the first time that like, especially in the title, because you get to all these poems that are so femme centered as they should be.
Mhm.
And then you get this poem and I'm like, well, where does husband come from? Like,
Mhm.
what's happening? And then I read it and I was like, there's some really interesting push and pull and tension happening in terms of agency and who is speaking. So I don't know. I wonder if you had like some things, some gems to offer, or some seeds to offer about that particular poem as well.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that poem. Um, I, I I was thinking about I think it's a Sylvia Plath poem that was like the zookeeper's wife.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and then I realized there's actually a kind of tradition of these poems that I know Bridget Pegan Keller has a poem that's either the thief's wife or the burglar's wife or something.
mm-hmm.
So just as like a form, again, a way into a poem, I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna do the beekeeper's husband and
Mm-hmm.
let's see what comes up.
Yeah.
But I think the what comes up part was really it's the range of kind of cruelty, really. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so um thinking about this mammy as stereotype and how we, even though it's a fiction, even in that we don't allow that person to be also, like, we don't think of that person as being sexually violated when that was like the person who was most accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And we instead imagine this woman who's like, um, not typically attractive and all of these things. Like, that's one end of it, and then there's like what happens today in a relationship. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, I don't know if it's clear, but i I was interested in this person who in the poem is like, he's lying. um and he knows he's lying. And it's a cruelty, really. And that kind of subtle, so from that to that, like, I wanted all of that to be in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't want to make it so that there wasn't a, like, a I don't want to say compassionate, but I didn't want to just completely throw that person under the bus. I wanted to take the I as a poet. I. And that point of view, and describe something that I think was a little bit more nuanced, I guess, is maybe the shorter answer to your question.
No. I mean, yeah, definitely the nuance, because too, particularly when it comes to violence against Black trans women, violence against Black women and femmes, and folks who are a part of those, overlapping communities, the violence has to be so stark for it to be a quarter of the time believed. And even then, it's like, how many times do I have to keep repeating, I am being violated, I have been violated? And then having that too in the framework of like, the thing that Toni Morrison says, that like, said, I still have a hard time saying her name in the past tense.
Right.
But that Morrison would talk about, the notion of the villain, and how not only boring, but like flat it is to have someone who is purely evil, because that's not humanity. Like, we talk about, humanity, and we want to see like the good in humanity, but the other part of humanity is like brutality and our propensity for violence and harm and cruelty. And it takes a lot of like collective and individual work simultaneously to like, untangle those things. So I caught that nuance for sure. But I also think that the notion of just like, this dude is lying and he lying. And it's like, that's like how the violence of like white heteronormative patriarchy continues to be the biggest con, as evident of what we barely survived through in this election, right? Barely. And people are like, but Biden. And I was like,
yeah,
an abuser. So like, what do you mean?
Totally.
So I think there needs to be more space for that nuance, those conversations about that nuance. And I think sometimes that nuance, gets lost. Like, honestly, I'm not necessarily trying to drag my trauma all over the page all the time. Like, at some point, I would like y'all to look at this as like a larger thing, and not just my quote unquote personal pain, while you ignore my sister next to me, or, watching videos of women getting beat in the street and thinking that that's fodder for like passing that around the internet. Right. So I think that nuance is definitely there. And I think that, again, this echoing, this mirroring of having such an expanse, of pulling in like a personal history, of pulling in like a national history, if you will, pulling in a historical framework and trying to like mitigate that all in the same poem. I find it incredibly challenging. I don't know if you would feel the same way of trying to pull all those things in, but like, maybe that goes into my next question too, about, because I think of this as like archival work, right? Like, you're pulling certain things, whether it's personal archive, whether it's historical archive. And so talk to me about, how you came across this ridiculous Betty Crocker letter and clearly needed to respond because what? And then similar to the archive of like, looking at the ekphrastic, taking the archive of, the middle poem that has such an extraordinary approach to the page of these footnotes and blasting open text, but then also like leaving one line on the page. Talk to me about how archival is kind of working in that way.
Yeah. So this, it ties into what you're talking about in terms of like, or what we're trying to describe, this expanse. So the poem, she said, it's pulling together a lot of different voices. But the majority of it is like this transcript from 1612 of this rape trial. And this, I'll just read part of it. How long after it happened did you tell? Why didn't you tell it immediately? And if immediately, why didn't you bring suit? Why have you said it now? And what induced you to say it? This was like right after the Senate Judiciary Committee interviewed Dr. Christine Baisley Ford, and it was like the same language. Like, it was like, wait, 1612, 2018, and literally like people are saying the same things to women. And I guess I didn't feel comfortable using any of the dialogue like from the trial. And this is like the backstory of the painter Artemisia Gentileschi. And I'll just show you this big old book. So that's like her really famous, her rendition of Judith slaying Hall of Furnace. And she reportedly had made the figure in the resemblance of the person who raped her. And again, that was one of those moments where it's like, I feel super compelled. I want to research more. I know I want to write about this. And then when I got to the transcript and I knew I didn't want to use the dialogue, but saw all these footnotes, I was like, oh, let's see what happens if I just try to use these as the text. So it really is partly just about process. Like, I like to research. I like to kind of find something that I'm interested in and then dig more. And then maybe a form or a poem comes out of that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you for that. It makes me think too of like, because we're also talking about like researching and pulling info, but then like there's also, you know, us pushing against what we know are interpretations that are harmful, but then also what we encounter are our own interpretations and trying to reimagine that as well. And so I think about that particularly in the sense of like visual art. And I, of course, noticed the first time that I read it, I was like, oh, we too love the queen that slays Miss Lorna Simpson and this head on ice. Yes. I was like, ma'am, yes, yes, yes. So yeah, I don't know, how is it, you know, that sort of ekphrastic approach again, looking at these images and these figures and trying to figure out what is happening and how it can be reinterpreted in a way or illuminated in a way. And in general, you know, tell me about your love for Miss Lorna Simpson.
Yeah, I love Lorna Simpson. And also, you know, Lorna Simpson was I think it's the water bearer piece. It was actually on the cover of a bell hooks, one of, you know, I don't know if it's still the cover of the book, but when I was growing up, like high school, it was the cover of Sisters of the Yam, Black Women in Self-Recovery. And so I didn't even know who Lorna Simpson was, but I remember that image.
Yeah.
All of the kind of photographs from her late 80s work, which is like back to the camera. So she's, you know, really pushing against being frontal and showing you everything she had. Anyway, so there's that. There's the, you know, Phoebe Francis's Formers Primeval has a Lorna Simpson cover. You do. Danika's upcoming book, Danica Kelly's upcoming book has a.
Is getting all the shout outs right now.
So, and I just feel like I feel like there's a reason why, like, right? Like because, you know, she's been doing work for so long, and it ranges from conceptual to video to paintings to photograph. And she also works with text. And, you know, I think her, Kara Walker, Carrie Mae Weems are just like incredible writers as well. So I don't know, I was really enthralled by these works and the Head on Ice series. And I was also just thinking about, I guess as a behind frame, you know, Sapphire and Jezebel and the Manny and all of these stereotypes. And I wanted to like get all of them into the book, even if it wasn't really explicit. That poem with the color and Sapphire, yeah. I know, I think we're out of time, Aricka.
It's ridiculous. We clearly have the good taste. We clearly have the good perspective. And we're clearly in conversation, even if we haven't met yet, but we're in conversation on the page.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it's.
I don't know, Dan, I haven't seen any audience Q&A. I didn't want to take up all the time with my questions. I literally could keep asking you questions for the rest of the evening about like, tell me about this line, tell me about this trochee, like, please, please, please. But if there are any like Q&A questions, I'd be happy to field those to Ms. Alma. Oh, I see. Oh, yes. I'm ready. Oh, Allison. Hey, Allison. Says, is this the book? Lorna Simpson collages Black women's heads are hair of galaxies unto themselves, solar systems, and games. So there's a book by Lorna that has a what do you call it? A blurb endorsement from Elizabeth Alexander from the introduction. And then it's using all the like advertising photographs of Black women and men from vintage issues of Ebony and Jet.
Yep, that's it.
That's it. I saw her work online. I happened to see, I think it was Hauser and Wirth, but it wasn't the one in Los Angeles. It was the one in the UK. And I happened to come across Instagram and I was like, that looks like Lorna's work. Let me see what this is about. And then I like dived in and saw the entire series and I was obsessed. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Allison. Yes, that is definitely the book. Please cop it for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, yeah. I feel obliged to like wrap us up just because I know people have made an investment. Yeah. And do you want to say anything else, Aricka, before?
I mean, besides the fact that everybody should buy this chapbook immediately if they haven't already gotten it. I'm not going to chide you for being late because we are living in a whole panini, a whole Pythagorean theorem. Oh, it looks like somebody said, I think Tristan just got the chapbook, looking forward to the read. So yeah, please support the book. I think it's incredible. I'm excited to see whether it's these poems or, you know, I've been reading poems of yours in journals for so long too. So I'm just like, ooh, a snack. So I'm excited to see this genesis of this project. And thank you so much again for taking the time and having me be a part of your celebration. And I'm so happy we get to connect in this way for sure.
It's like a true pleasure, Aricka, to meet you on the page and to meet you in this space. And hopefully one day to meet you in person.
I know, one day we're going to be free. I believe it. I believe in us, mostly.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for being present.
Yeah, you're wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to Alma. Thank you to Aricka. I want to thank our co-sponsor, Quayle, Buy Blood of the Air at Ampersand Books. And I'll just say you can also catch up with videos of our past readings at our website, wab.org. If you want to revisit this reading, it will be online within a week or two. So check back. And thank you to everyone for coming, and have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.